bells were still ringing when Sansa Stark felt the marble beneath the Red Keep tremble like a frightened colt, every vibration carrying the panicked heartbeat of King's Landing itself. Down in the city, boiling streets surged with broken wine barrels, hurled chamber pots, and the angry roar of thousands who had eaten sawdust for bread and called it nourishment. From the window slit of her borrowed chamber, Sansa could smell it even before she could see it. The iron-heavy tang of blood mingling with ash and rotten fruit. The sour, almost sweet smoke of pitch-soaked torches, and the hot human stench of fear. A fast chill lanced down her spine. She pressed her palms to the stone sill, trying to steady breath that fluttered like a sparrow's wings. The riot had been whisper-thick around the court all morning, but whispers had turned to shouts, then to screams. Somewhere beyond the outer wall, a mob had taken a septa and torn her apart for daring to pray when they wanted bread. Sansa had clutched her stomach at the story, convinced she could still taste the woman's terror in the air. Now the terror was a storm front closing over the capital, and thunder rumbled in the yard below, in the form of armored men scrambling to answer Joffrey's shrill commands. When the chamber door crashed open, Sansa whirled, skirts whispering about her legs. Ser Meryn's silhouette filled the doorway for a breath, a sneer behind an iron-barred helm. But he vanished, shoved aside by a darker shadow that smelled of horse and oiled leather. Little bird. Sandor Clegane growled, voice rough as the whetstone he dragged along his longsword each night. Your king's lost his wits and the city's lost its leash. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. He entered without waiting for permission, sealing the door behind him with a meaty hand that dwarfed the bronze latch. Sansa pressed her back to the wall, her own fingers tangled at her waist. She remembered the last riot, when the Hound had lifted her bodily from a knot of men who had ripped her gown to ribbons. His grip had bruised, but it had been the only solid thing in a whirlwind of filthy hands and leering mouths. Now his presence meant the difference between escape and ruin. Sandor crossed the room in 2 strides, catching a wisp of auburn hair between 2 mailed fingers. You listen to me, or you die with the rest, he said, not unkindly, but with the blunt edge of a man who had trudged through too many wars to sugar truths for anyone. The king will not protect you. The queen is locked in her cellars. Ser Meryn's already half blind with panic, and the city watch has scattered like hens before a fox. His dark eyes flicked to the window. Better men than them are dying for coins instead of causes right now. Sansa lifted her chin, a slow burn of anger igniting her fear. And what of you, sir? Will you die for your king? I'll die for myself, the Hound muttered, then spat on the floor. But not today, and not here. He turned to the bed and tore away the bolster of embroidered pillows, revealing a leather satchel and a plain gray cloak. Items he must have hidden hours earlier. The sight startled Sansa more than the Raya's cacophony. He had planned. Plans meant intention. Intentions meant choices. The Hound shrugged the cloak around her shoulders, drawing the hood low. Keep it up, he ordered, brushing stray locks of stark red hair back under the wool. You look like every baker's wife in the city from a distance. Even so, those eyes of yours are north in winter. Learn to slouch. Now. She tried, but her posture refused to forget the courtly training taught by Septa Mordain. Sandor cursed softly, scooping an arm around her waist, as though she weighed less than a training dummy. We don't have time, he said. Follow me or I'll throw you over my shoulder. The door creaked again. This time the corridor yawned empty. The tremors had faded, leaving a stillness inside the keep, like the hush that follows a battle's first devastating volley. Down in the courtyard, gold cloaks jostled for positioning at the outer gates, but the men who commanded them had vanished, and their yellow cloaks were already smeared brown with mud and worse. Sandor pushed Sansa ahead of him, down a stair that spiraled so tight her skirts tangled about her ankles. Each clang of distant iron, each echo of yelling, felt like hands stretching through walls. She bit her lip until she tasted copper and reminded herself to breathe. At the foot of the stair they emerged into a torch-lit passage. The servants' corridor that latticed the Red Keep like veins beneath skin. The Hound moved with an agility Sansa had never credited to a man so mountain-wide, guiding her from shadow to shadow when guards pelted past at full sprint. More than once he dragged her into a wine closet, pressing her back to cool stone while his own burned with the heat of forge-kindled memory. His burned face, half hidden beneath helm, glinting in the gloom. They crossed a courtyard littered with dropped pikes and shattered shields. A man lay face down between overturned barrels, a crossbow bolt stuck from his back, but his hand still twitched as though plucking at an unseen harp. Sansa recoiled, but Sandor's hand at her elbow kept her moving. "This is mercy compared to what the streets will teach you," he rasped. Beyond the stables, the air changed. Smoke drifted in sluggish tunnels through the postern arch, spiced with something acrid that clawed at the throat. Sansa tasted it and knew fire had already reached the outer ward. Small folk set the granaries alight. Sandor said, reading her expression, "Better to burn what they cannot eat than let lords levy it." She'd heard Maester Pycelle speak of famine, a creeping thing that gnawed first at bellies, then at minds. Starving men became wolves, and wolves cared not whose bones they cracked. Her father had wanted to fill the city storehouses before winter. Lord Baelish had advised him to borrow grain against future taxes. Now winter had arrived on a summer wind, and all the debts came due in fire and blood. They slipped through the postern gate behind the stables. The guardhouse there should have been manned by 3 crossbowmen, but the firing slit showed only an empty rack of quarrels. The men had likely fled to search for families, or loot. Sandor kicked the iron-bound door once. It banged open on a broken hinge. Outside the walls, chaos had teeth. Flames licked at the thatch roofs of the Street of Flower, each guttural pop of burning pitch drowned by shouts of rage and triumph. Merchant stalls lay overturned, spilling sacks of spoiled apples into muck, churned ankle-deep. A woman in a torn silk gown pressed herself against a wall, arms shielding her face while 3 ragged youths pawed at her skirts. Sansa moved toward her before she understood the impulse. Sandor jerked her back. "Look away," he said. "But look away or look dead. Your choice." She swallowed. One of the youths raised a dagger. The blade caught torchlight, flashing gold for a heartbeat. Then the woman's scream cut the air. Sansa's fingers dug into her palms so hard they shook. The Hound steered her east, away from the main artery that led toward the Great Sept. Instead, he cut down a half-forgotten lane, lined with dyers' workshops. Puddles of cobalt and crimson pooled beneath cracked shutters, staining cobbles like rainbows weeping. The smell was chemical, overwhelming enough to mask the fire stink from the market. They walked that way for what felt like an hour, though Sansa could judge little past the thunder of her pulse. Each corner revealed a different hell. A baker slumped over his ovens, throat slit and dough still rising. A squire stumbling after his horse, the animal's entrails trailing like pink ribbons. A septon reciting prayers no one heard as torches consumed the wooden steps of his chapel. At a tanner's yard, the Hound paused beneath the rotting beams of a drying shed. He unlatched the satchel, withdrawing a skin of water and a heel of hard bread. Sansa accepted the bread, though her mouth felt stuffed with cotton. She chewed until saliva returned, then glanced at him. "Where are we going?" "Out," he said. "Out to where?" "Doesn't matter. Somewhere the Lannisters won't be." "You served the Lannisters." "I served myself under their coin. My coin spent." His gaze lingered on her face, searching. "Do you trust me, little bird?" The question pierced deeper than accusation. It felt like confession. She thought of the courtyard months ago, when he had laid his cloak over her shoulders after Joffrey's knights had beaten her. Of the night he came to her chamber door smelling of wine and fear the day Blackwater's echo cannons fired across the bay. And of every quiet cruelty he had endured from the king without ever lifting his sword against a child. "Yes," she said, surprised to find it true. "Then keep up." They left the drying shed, hugging the tannery wall until it spat them into a narrow alley that sloped toward the Blackwater rush. Here the noise of riot dulled, replaced by distant hammering of bells and the low roar of river on pilings. They passed a row of fishermen's shacks where nets hung like ghost skins. Children huddled in doorways clutching wooden clubs, guarding buckets of writhing eels, dinner and defense in one. At the foot of the slope, the riverbank spread like a dark mirror, catching flares of moving firelight. Rafts bumped against water stairs, abandoned or hidden by owners fearing conscription. Sandor chose a half-tarped skiff, slashed the rope mooring it, and gestured Sansa aboard. She stepped gingerly, skirts trailing. The hull rocked, and for an instant, the city lights danced on wave-torn currents like shards of orange glass. Sandor untied the second rope and shoved off with a pole nearly as tall as he. The skiff drifted sideways, then found the sluggish channel beneath the easternmost span of the Dragon Gate. Above them, the stone arch loomed, gargoyles snarling down as though mocking the mob they no longer terrified. Sansa felt the city recede behind that arch. It was both liberation and exile. The Hound worked the pole in steady strokes, guiding them around rafts thick with refugees chanting prayers to the Mother. A man in rust-flaked armor offered a silver stag for space on their vessel. Sandor ignored him. When the river widened, he stowed the pole and unfurled a canvas sail patched 3 different shades, though the night held little wind. It was enough to draw them south, away from the Red Keep's silhouette gilded by riot flames. Sansa slumped against a coil of rope, exhaustion spilling through her limbs like chilled honey. The hoodie cloak smelled of horse sweat and ember-scented leather. The smell of the Hound. Strange comfort. Her mind began to drift, replaying scenes like lantern slides. Joffrey's purpled face cursing the crowd, the Hound's arm around her waist, the shouts, the woman's scream, the dagger's flash, the river's hush. She woke to creak of rope and flap of sail. Dawn stained the horizon bruised peach. Sandor crouched at the stern, helm off. Scarred face half lit by a sky so pale it hurt the eyes. He caught her look. "You slept," he observed. "I dreamed of snow," she whispered. "Snow's honest. It hides nothing, but lies about nothing either. Benderol." She tried to imagine King's Landing beneath a blanket of winter snow rather than summer dust. The thought felt impossible, like picturing a dragon sleeping in her lap. Yet she longed for it, cold, pure and untainted by screams. "How far will the river carry us?" she asked. "Until it meets the sea, if need be. But I know a place where we can strike north. Woods thick enough to swallow 10,000 little birds." He reached into the satchel and produced a dirk, its blade narrow, handle wrapped in brown leather. He offered it, hilt first. "For wolves, not men. Steel's a last resort." Sansa's fingers closed around the haft. The weight felt alien, dangerous, yet vital. She nodded, slipping the blade beneath her cloak. By mid-morning, they grounded the skiff on a marshy spit, where willow boughs drooped like mourners. Sandor dragged the craft into reeds, camouflaging it beneath slashed canvas. Then they set off westward along a deer track, moving between thickets alive with humming gnats. Sansa's slippers were soaked within minutes, mud oozing between silk and skin. She said nothing, remembering the Hound's warning about 2 straight backs. They reached high ground at dusk. From a granite ridge they saw the Blackwater Delta unfurl like a serpent of hammered copper. Smoke still smudged the air above the distant city, yet the wind carried no screams. Only gulls cried. Sandor found a hollow beneath a leaning cedar and built a small fire ash-gray beneath an overturned pot to smother light. They shared dry sausage and stale oatcake, while night creatures sang beyond firelight. Sansa shivered beneath the cloak, the day's images looping behind her eyes. "Will the king send men after us?" she asked. "King?" Sandor barked a brittle laugh. "Joffrey's no king. Boy's a leech fat on others' blood. But he'll send hounds, real ones, if his mother whispers it's sport. Then we must outrun them. We will." He poked the coals. "You're stronger than you know." It was the first kindness she could remember since her father's head had fallen before the Baelor Sept. Tears pricked. She bit her lip and tasted that copper tang again. She would not weep in front of him, not now. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we cross into the Kingswood. Wolves and brigands there, but fewer ears for gold." And Sansa lay on a bed of pine needles, the cloak doubled for a pillow. The Hound sat with back against the cedar, sword across knees, eyes never still. Firelight etched pits and ridges of his scarred cheek, and for a moment, She saw not a monster but a sentinel carved of bronze, weathered by heat and time. Sleep claimed her in fits. Dreams of Arya's laughter chasing pigeons through Winterfell's yard. Of her mother's voice singing the Song of the Seven. Of the Hound standing in a blaze of wildfire, face unmasked, flames licking his burn like a second skin while he held out a hand to her. "Follow or burn, girl!" She followed. Dawn's pale hue bled through cedar limbs. Sandor nudged her awake with a boot. They broke camp without sound, smothered the coals to cold ash, and slipped into the kingswood beneath a lattice of oak and beech. Sunlance shade painted the forest floor, dappling moss with shifting coins of gold. Hours stretched into days measured by birdsong, by meals of rabbits snared in loops of gut string, by quiet lessons whispered beside cooking fires. How to find true north by moss. How to know which berries fed or felled. Sansa listened, absorbing each trick like a new verse to an old hymn. She practiced drawing the dirk without nicking skirt hem or wrist veins. Sandor corrected her stance only when necessary, hand heavy on her shoulder, voice a rumble of earth. They spoke little of King's Landing, yet its shadow stalked them. Once they stumbled upon 3 corpses swinging from beech limbs, gold cloaks still pinned at their throats, deserters caught by villagers. Another time they found a village blackened to cinders, bodies heaped atop burned flour sacks. Reprisal from Lord Tywin's outriders, Sandor guessed. Somehow, these sights felt more distant than the memory of the man with the dagger in the alley. That scream haunted Sansa in still moments when owls ceased. Weeks passed, though the tally blurred. They skirted a Lannister encampment by night, the glow of cookfires flickering through pines like a constellation fallen to earth. Sandor watched, jaw clenched. "Half these men rode with me against the green fire," he said. "They'd gut me for a dragon each if they saw my face. So we stay unseen," Sansa answered, surprising them both. One morning they reached the Trident's southern fork, where an old stone bridge arched over lazy green water. The Hound studied the span, silent. Across the river lay land sworn to Harrenhal, now seat of Lord Bolton. Rumor said Roose Bolton had taken Harrenhal after the mountain fled north. Rumor also said he flayed prisoners alive inside its scorched halls. Either rumor chilled the blood. "We could turn east," Sansa suggested, though exhaustion tugged at her bones. "Find a fisherman willing to barter passage. Too many patrols on the Green Fork," Sandor said. "Bolton's flaying banners hang on every village, and Frey archers nest near the twins like fleas on a dog's arse." "Then west," she said, pointing toward a line of blue hills. "There's a mountain man's pass father spoke of." "The clans are fierce, but they keep their word if treated justly." Sandor eyed her, a flicker of respect in those cold dark irises. "Winterfell whelps know their maps and their stories." She allowed a small smile. "The clans revere guest right, the old gods, and sword skill above ransom. You fit at least one of those virtues." His snort could have meant amusement. He hefted his pack, adjusted the straps across broad shoulders. "If the clans laugh at your wolf stories, we'll just steal their horses." They traced the river upstream 3 days, avoiding crossings and foraging on wild garlic, river trout, and bags of oats traded for a dented copper cup Sandor had carried from King's Landing. Each night Sansa sharpened her dirk, the rasp of whetstone steady under cricket strown. Her hands grew calloused, her gait sure on pine-blanketed slopes. On the 4th morning, they climbed a broken stair of limestone that wound through towering white pines. At the summit, the world opened. Far below the Trident shimmered silver, meandering through quilted fields. Beyond, a smear of smoke marked King's Landing where the Red Keep's spires pierced haze like splinters. Days of travel, and yet the capital seemed to cling to the horizon like a curse. Sansa wrapped arms around herself. "It looks so small," she murmured. "Small wounds fester worst," Sandor answered. He pulled away, scanning the forest behind them. Something in his stance stiffened. "Riders," he said. She heard it then, distant clatter of hooves on shale. 6 riders at least, coming fast along the lower path. Sunlight sparked on metal. She counted 2 banners whipping, the golden lions of Lannister. Sandor grabbed her wrist. "Down slope," he ordered. They slid over the far side of the ridge into a ravine coated in fern. Sansa's cloak snagged on thorns. She yanked free, ignoring the tear. At the ravine's base, a tunnel of briars opened into darkness. "This way," Sandor whispered, ducking. Inside the briar hollow, light thinned to gloam. Roots formed a natural lattice, weaving an earthen ceiling overhead. They crawled until the tunnel widened into a grotto where chilled spring water dripped from limestone teeth. Sandor drew his sword and melted into shadow near the entrance. Sansa crouched beside a mossy boulder, dirk clutched tight. The riders passed above, the clop of shod hooves muffled yet unmistakable. Voices floated down, jeering laments about losing a thread of the dog in these gods' cursed woods. One suggested torching the forest. Another laughed that Clegane would come to their fire like a moth. Then hooves faded. Minutes stretched until silence settled heavy. Sandor sheathed steel. "We move at dusk," he said. "They'll circle back." Sansa nodded, adrenaline cooling to tremor. She stared at her knuckles, white as linen, dotted with flecks of moss. Slowly she forced fingers to uncurl. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," she said, breathing through it. "But fear does not move my feet anymore." He studied her, unreadable. Then, in a voice softer than she had ever heard from him, he said, "Your mother would be proud." She thought of Lady Stark's stern kindness, her weeping at Bran's bedside, her charge to keep Arya and Sansa safe. Tears welled, but she blinked them clear. "Not yet," she said. "But I will give her reason." That night, they left the ravine, darting west beneath a bowl of stars. The air carried autumn's promise, though summer still gripped the south. They tread a goat path until dawn limned peaks, with rose gold. On the ridge ahead, a ring fort crowned with stacked stone walls jutted like a broken tooth. The first sentinel of the mountain clans. Smoke rose from its hearth tower, and antlered torches flanked a wooden gate studded with iron nails. Sandor halted at tree line. "They'll shoot if we approach wrong." Sansa stepped forward. "Let me speak. The old tongue still walks these hills." And Shao. His brow arched, but he nodded. She raised her voice in the harsh, rolling cadences her nurse had taught her as a child, a dialect older than the Andal's arrival. "We seek passage and offer stories for shelter." The words felt like stones in her mouth, unpracticed yet true. Figures appeared atop the wall. Men in boiled leather, axes slung over shoulders. One called down an answer in the same tongue. Sansa listened, heart hammering. "They ask our blood." She translated quietly. "I said Stark, daughter of Eddard." Sandor grunted. "And me." She lifted her chin toward the watchman. "And my sworn shield." She shouted. "He has no lord but honor." The watchman barked a reply. The gate groaned open. Inside, the fort smelled of smoke, goat, and pine pitch. Women stirred cauldrons, while children chased dogs through damp straw. "Delway May." A balding man with silver rings in his beard greeted them. "Stark blood walks no more in these parts," he said in a common tongue, tone wary. "Word rides faster than crows. Winterfell lies in ashes." His eyes lingered on Sansa's face, noting pain no tears could hide. "My brothers yet live." She answered, voice trembling then firming. "My blood walks wherever I place my feet." The clan chief considered, then dipped his chin. "Your feet are welcome by our fire tonight. Come inside, daughter of winter." They were given a hearth corner in the longhouse, a wooden bowl of goat stew laced with bitter mountain herbs, and coarse bread baked in ash. Sansa ate slowly, each bite a ceremony of survival. Sandor sat cross-legged beside her, sword across knees. He drank thick ale but refused more than a mouthful of stew. That night, clan elders demanded tales in exchange for hospitality. Sansa spoke first. The founding of Winterfell by Bran the Builder. The fall of the kings of Winter. The crowning of the kings in the north. Her voice rose and fell like wind through stone corridors. Firelight shivered across listeners' faces. Children wide-eyed, warriors stern. Crones nodding to every name she invoked. When she faltered, Sandor surprised the hall by speaking of battles in the Crownlands. The Black Water, the turning of wildfire to green sun, the heroism of Davos Seaworth who braved the fire to try and break the chain. He spared no mention of his own flight, nor of the king he abandoned. Yet his words gripped the room like a gauntlet. Men leaned forward to hear of ships split by walls of flame. Sansa watched them, realizing they listened not to a Lannister dog, but to a survivor of Dragon's Breath. At story's end, the clan chief rose. "You have paid your keep twice over," he declared. "At dawn we guide you north through the mountain heart. You will cross at Widow's Pass and find the King's Road beyond. But know the land ahead is splintered. Robb Stark marches west, the Greyjoys raid up the neck, and Bolton wolves sniff every campfire." Sansa bowed her head. "I thank you." That night, under the smoke-dark rafters, she dreamed of direwolves howling across snow-swept fields. Their heads turned south, calling her home. In the dream, she followed their tracks east of dawn until she reached a hilltop, where her mother waited, hair silvered by moonlight. Smiling. "You are not lost," Lady Stark said. When Sansa woke, tears wet her cheeks, but they felt cleansing, not bitter. The clan guides kept their word. 3 lean men in fur mantles led them along switchback trails above treeline, past talus fields where eagles nested. From those heights, the world lay in layers. Blackwoods in valley shadows, silver rivers slicing plains, smoke spirals marking encampments. Each breath tasted of stone and lightning. At Widow's Pass, their guides departed with solemn handclasps. Beyond, the mountains eased into rolling foothills dotted with juniper. But the King's Road they sought ran choked with refugees, wagons jammed wheel to wheel, riders scanning for ambush. Word had spread that Robb Stark's host had captured Jaime Lannister, that Tywin now marched for River Run. Armies moved like storms, swallowing roads and lives alike. Sandor scowled at the congestion. "Too many eyes. We cannot walk alone forever," Sansa said. "Perhaps among many we hide best." He grunted. They merged with the moving multitude, a thread in tapestry of suffering. Sansa kept her hood low, but even so she glimpsed her reflection in a stream. Cheeks smudged with dirt, hair a tangled rope, eyes no longer wide with naivety, but bright with tempered steel. Days bled together on the King's Road. They slept under wagons or in ditches, traded the Hound's whetstone for a battered mule. Shared stories with small folk who spoke of wolves in the south, dragons in the east, and winter creeping from the far north on silent feet. Through it all, Sandor never strayed more than 5 paces from her side. She learned to read his silences. When he scanned treeline, trouble brewed. When he grunted twice, eat quickly. When he muttered a curse and loosened sword belt, danger breathed down their necks. On the 27th night since King's Landing, a horn call shattered darkness. Torches flared on the road ahead. Armored riders pushed through the caravan, barking orders in fray colors. Their horses snorted plumes. All travelers bound for River Run must submit to questioning, one shouted. Sandor stiffened. "Will you?" Wagons pressed in from behind, locking them between wooden walls. The mule brayed, stomping. A Frey soldier grabbed its bridle. "Names?" he demanded. Sandor's hand drifted to his hilt. Sansa touched his arm. "Stay. I am Ellen, daughter of a river trader," she said, voice calm. "This is my guard, Sir Sand." The soldier sniffed. "You carry coin?" "Only what our father left." She produced 3 silver pennies. He took 2. leaving one. Keep moving. They passed. Sansa released a breath she had caged. Sandor whispered, "If you'd offered 4, he'd have slit your throat for the 5th." She almost smiled. Soon afterward, the Frey patrols thinned. Caravan wagons turned east toward River Run, leaving them with open road north. Reports said the Neck was choked by Ironborn raiders, that Moat Cailin had fallen. Sansa's hope of reaching Winterfell flickered, but she stoked it with memories. Bran's laughter, the weirwood's red leaves, the sound of snow crunching beneath footsteps at dawn. One dusk, camped by an abandoned mill, Sandor set a candle stub on a flat stone. "The way ahead grows darker," he said. "I do not fear darkness." She answered, "You should. Wolves are not the only hunters in night woods. Nenero. I have claws now." She laid her dirk across her palms, edge shining. "Claws need will." He met her gaze. "Can you use it?" She remembered the alley in King's Landing, the woman's scream, the dagger's flash. "When the moment demands, I will not hesitate." Sandor studied her as though seeing a stranger, then nodded. "Good. Sleep. We move before dawn." That night the dream came again. The direwolves, the hill, her mother. But this time Lady Stark's smile faded. "Trust the fire when the snow falls," she said, voice echoing as though from a deep well. Sansa woke chilled, though embers still glowed in the pit. They broke camp beneath a moon that sliced the sky like a scythe. As they packed, distant wolf howls rolled down the valley. Real wolves, not dreams. The Hound listened. "We're in their lands now," he murmured. "They sing like my brother's banners," Sansa said. Sandor sheathed his sword. "Then let's hope they guide us home." They set off north, 2 silhouettes on a ribbon of road that wound through sleeping realms. Behind them, King's Landing smoldered beneath its crown of red towers. Ahead, Winterfell's ruins or salvation waited beyond river and frost. Between those destinies walked a girl no longer a hostage, and the man sworn to guard her for reasons he did not yet name. On the horizon, first snowflakes drifted like pale ghosts. Sansa let one melt on her tongue. It tasted of childhood and memory, but also of beginnings. She drew up her hood and pressed onward. The Hound's stride steady at her side, each step carrying them deeper into a story not yet written, but already alive with the promise of claws unsheathed against the long night to come. "Okay. One." The mule's hooves drummed a slow cadence on the frost-hard road, each clop a muted echo in the vast silence the first snows laid over the Neck. Dawn filtered through ragged pine tops like pale wine, staining the mist hovering above still ponds. Sansa Stark drew her cloak tighter, the wool scratchy against numb fingers, and watched her breath bloom in silver wisps that vanished before they rose past her eyes. They had left the King's Road 3 days before to follow deer trails threading the boglands, skirting villages rumored bent beneath the Kraken banner. Each dawn they found another farmhouse blackened or half sunk into mire, its hearth cold, its folk gone as if plucked by some unseen claw. Sandor Clegane said little beyond pointing out landmarks. Ruined watchtowers from long-dead petty kings, stone cairns sunk to their mossy shoulders, the shattered ribs of an Andal longship lodged in peat like a giant's bleached carcass. The Neck was a country of ghosts, Sansa thought, where every pool reflected not a sky, but the memory of wars past. Yet for all its bleakness she felt a strange easing in her chest. Here the riots' screams seemed impossibly distant, the Red Keep's marble halls nothing more than gilded nightmares. Even the Hound carried himself with a quiet born of caution rather than cynicism. He studied the horizon, sensing traps beneath every tuft of bulrush, but the raw edge of bitterness had dulled to wary focus. On the 4th day the marsh track dwindled to a thread between knuckled hillocks coated in heather. Beyond, low fog hid the water until their mule stepped ankle-deep and balked. Sandor cursed under his breath, dismounted, and tested the ground with his spear haft. The spear sank 2 feet before meeting anything solid. "Quick, Snow," he muttered. "Looks dry till it swallows you." A faint wind teased coarse strands of his hair across seared flesh. The scarred half of his face looked frozen in a perpetual rictus, the unscarred half set firm in calculation. He traced a semicircle, found a shelf of tussocks supporting his weight, and angled them northwest. Progress slowed to a crawl. They advanced in a broken zigzag, mule in tow, stepping from tussock to tussock, as if crossing a river on floating shields. Noon crept past unseen behind gauzy cloud, and with it came the croak of marsh crows, circling something unseen in the blankness. Sansa's calves burned from balancing on hummocks no wider than a shield boss. But she refused complaint. Each slip threatened to pitch her into white slurry that might be 1 inch or 1 fathom deep. By late afternoon, the fog thinned enough to reveal a gnarled oak atop a lone islet, no bigger than a long haul. Behind its trunk jutted a squat tower. Cracked sandstone, roofless, the top story surrendered to ivy. 2 crooked shutters clung like eyelids to a narrow window slit. Sandor snorted. Crannogman watchpost, long abandoned. He glanced at the sky, where failing light bled mauve into frozen cotton. Better roofless stone than open mire. We make camp. They coaxed the mule across a swaying plank bridge that looked ready to confess its sins to the mud at any moment. Inside, the tower smelled of owl roost and damp chalk. The floor had collapsed into the lower chamber, leaving a jagged lip. Sandor rigged a rope ladder from saddle straps and broken rafters. He descended first, then called Sansa down. Below lay a chamber 6 strides square, enclosed by walls too thick for wind to pierce. Charcoal from an ancient fire still blackened the hearth. Sandor swept ashes aside, set flint to pine shavings, and coaxed a fist-sized flame to life. Soon, a modest fire crackled. Sansa knelt near it, letting heat seep through her skirts into aching knees. She glanced at Sandor as he dropped his battered helm to the floor with a clang. He eased stiff shoulders, unbuckled gauntlets, and flexed scarred hands in the light. "Your face hurts in the cold," she said quietly. It slipped out before she weighed the boldness. He shrugged, but his good eye softened a hair. "Hurts in the heat. Hurts waking, breathing. Cold just reminds me I still have nerves enough to feel." That truth settled between them. She had feared that scar the first night outside King's Landing. Half a man's face molten, eye hooded beneath melted lid. But now it held no terror, only story. "Thank you," she said after a beat. "For what?" "For choosing the quicker path through the mire. You could have doubled back to the King's Road." "Then the one." He gave a low grunt. "Roads lined with Frey pikes these days. Quicker to risk bog devils than toll keepers." He met her gaze. "But you're welcome." They shared dried venison stripped 2 nights ago from a poacher's snare, gnawed it to sinew, and drank water that tasted faintly of iron from a skin. Then Sandor wedged a broken rafter into the doorway. Hung a small bell from a bit of wire, an alarm should anyone tamper with the bar. Night drew in, thick as tar. Beyond the ruined slit of a window, wolves howled, long mournful notes swelling under the crescent moon. Sansa hugged her knees and listened until the calls settled into her pulse. "Your brother's sigil sings you home," Sandor murmured across the coals. "If home still stands," she whispered. He said nothing. Silence admitted no false comfort. She closed her eyes, seeing Winterfell's gray towers in memory. Snow piled on battlements, ravens wheeling above the godswood, Bran racing along the walls, Arya's laugh echoing. She felt those images slipping like silk through her grasp. With a fresh pang, she realized she feared finding Winterfell whole, almost as much as ruined. Whole yet emptied of everything she loved. The fire sank to embers. Sandor stirred, stamped out glowing chips, and unrolled a thin blanket near the wall. "Rest, little bird." She lay down, cloak for mattress, dirk under palm. Sleep came in waves fractured by dream. Visions of dark water swallowing flame. Of father's voice carried on snow-laden wind. Of a hound made of shadow standing sentinel beside a heart tree, bleeding rubies. She woke to a dawn pale as unpolished silver. Sandor was already up, feeding thin twigs to the fire. Outside, snowfall hushed the world. The marsh that yesterday gleamed white quicksand now lay iced under a brittle crust. "The snow's our road," Sandor said. "Frozen top'll bear a mule's weight if we move fast." He broke camp quickly, eyes scanning for threat. They crossed the islet bridge and pushed north, hooves crunching ice shards that sounded indecently loud in the perfect hush. Each breath fogged and fell like shards of pearl. By midday, the frozen crust shattered beneath the mule's hind leg. The beast plunged to its belly with a shriek. Sandor sprang to its side, pike butt braced as lever, heaving until the creature lurched free, soaked haunch glistening with black mud. As they regrouped, a faint whistle cut the frigid air. Sandor's head jerked up. Sansa followed his gaze. Atop a lichen-blurred boulder 30 paces distant stood a figure small and swathed in mottled greens and browns, a short recurved bow half-drawn. Feathered arrows poked from a quiver at the figure's back. Moss and bone charms clattered at the hip. Another whistle sang behind them. Then a third. Shapes materialized from tussocks. Lean men and women, some beardless youths, others gray-braided, all wearing the marsh as skin. Granagman. Sandor gripped hilt. "Stay calm," he breathed. Sansa lifted her hands slowly. "I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell." She called, the name a banner beating in her chest. "Daughter of Eddard, Lord of the North. We seek safe passage." One of the marshfolk stepped forward, older, with owl feathers bound into her hair, eyes pale as glass eels. She studied Sansa, then tapped her own chest twice with the end of a bone-handled spear. Sansa's heart pounded. She recognized the gesture from old tales Maester Luwin had told of Howland Reed's people. "I see you. I greet you. I am niece to Howland Reed." Sansa tried, praying the web of old alliances yet held. "My mother is Caitlin of House Tully. We ride north to warn of dangers." The owl-haired woman conferred in low croaks with her companions. 2 younger men knocked arrows but did not raise them. At last the woman nodded. She whistled, a sharp 3-note trill. From behind a hump of briar stepped a taller figure. Slight but broad of shoulder, hood back to reveal hair, dark as wet peat and threaded with reed fiber. He carried no armor, only a vest of boiled leather stitched with turtle shell plates. When he leaned his spear aside, Sansa glimpsed a necklace, teeth of fish and shards of obsidian. "I am Jojen Reed," he said, not boyish, as she remembered Bran's stories, but a man hardened by years the South had stolen from them all. "You carry wolf's blood in you. I see it clearer than the dawn. Speak your purpose swiftly." Sansa's throat tightened. "I must reach my brother Robb or my brother Bran. The Lannisters hunt me, the Boltons worse. The South is drowning in war. If Winterfell stands, I would come home." Jojen studied her, sightless and seeing both. "Winterfell stands but smolders, a shell of itself. The Boltons hold it in your name, pretending fealty to the Iron Throne while sharpening flaying knives. Your brother Robb marches outrider raids against Lannister lands to lure Tywin from Harrenhal. He wins victories but bleeds men he cannot replace." He paused. "News of your death has traveled with the carrion crows. Your living presence is weapon and shield both. But we must carry you past more than frozen bogs. And now," Sansa swallowed grief and anger in one breath, "will you help? The children of the Neck keep faith with the children of the North," Jojen said. "We will guide you by river and tree shadow, under canopies that blind falcons and dragons alike." Sandor shifted, eyeing the lean warriors with skepticism. One elbow-height hunter might trip him with a spear between ankles, but a dozen could slow even his strength to dying throes. He gave Sansa a curt nod. Her call. "Thank you," Sansa said, voice raw. The Cranagmen melted into motion. 2 splashed forward to soothe the trembling mule. One produced a poultice of white swamp clay to smear over the beast's strained joint. Another approached Sandor and offered a waterskin tasting of salt and pine. They traveled in dispersed file. Jojen walked beside Sansa and asked softly of King's Landing, of the riot spark. of Joffrey's cruelty. She told him of the mob's fury, the septa torn apart, the Tyrell's holdfast burned, the small folks' hunger. Jojen listened with eyes unfocused, as though parsing threads in a tapestry only he could sense. When chaos rules cities, old powers walk freer, he said at length. You have stepped between worlds now. Sansa Stark. Beware paths that appear as escape but coil into labyrinth. Sandor snorted behind her. Is that prophecy or bog riddle? Jojen's half-smile was chill. Both. Dog of deserts. Deserts, Sandor growled. A face burned by sun-forged flame has crossed sand in dream, Jojen replied. But the wound is deeper than sand or fire. Guard it, or it becomes blade through which others cut you. MC. Sandor glared but said no more. They spent that night in a hall of living reeds. Walls woven arm-thick around a pit hearth sunk into damp earth, roof thatched with cattail leaves. Sansa lay on a pallet stuffed with goosedown, listening to marsh music. Frogs croaking, owls hooting, the far slap of water against hollow logs. For the first time since fleeing the Red Keep, she felt a fragile bubble of safety, held in place by strangers sworn to no lord but tradition. Dawn broke slate gray. They loaded the mule onto a wide-bottomed punt. Sansa and Sandor took seats amid bundles of smoked eel, while crannogmen poled through channels, no wider than a man's shoulders. Willows crowding the bank draped winter-naked branches into water, and coot flocks parted before the keel like oil. Every turn looked the same mirror of fog and vine, yet Sansa felt they drew closer to something essential, the heartwood of the north. At midday they glided from a covered tunnel of birch into a sudden expanse, a lake flat as a polished blade, its surface reflecting battleship skies. At its center rose a man-made island fortress of timber palisades and intertwined reeds, ringed by decks where crab traps hung to dry. Smoke spooled from clay chimneys. Jojen called it Greywater Watch, Castle of House Reed, though it drifted southward slowly every year, never where maps swore. Boats converged, voices hailing in soft croaks. The punt docked beneath an archway hung with skulls of monstrous pike and white stag horns. Inside the palisade, a courtyard of plank walks spiraled around a central tower carved from logs of black spruce. Atop its steps awaited a woman in cloak of marsh wolf fur, long hair streaked with iron, eyes bright as wet jade. Sansa Stark, she greeted, voice deep as peat. I am Meera Reed. Sansa stepped onto the planks, knees watery after hours on water. Meera took her hands, warm, strong, and looked into her face as if reading a riddle and finding answer pleasing. Our fathers were bound by blood and battle, Meera said. You are welcome in Greywater so long as tides carry us. Sandor disembarked last, towering. Meera's gaze flicked across his scars without flinch or pity. And you, Clegane? You bear the lion's sigil no longer. Bah! No banners, he rasped. Meera nodded once. You saved her from red talons. My hearth is open. That night Greywater feasted. Smoked boar. Frog's legs dipped in nettle batter. Turtle stew thick with corn. Music rose from reed pipes and drumskins, stretched over fishbone frames. Children danced barefoot on the planks, their laughter echoing across black water. Sansa allowed herself a cup of elderflower wine. It tasted of summers too distant to recall. Later, Meera guided Sansa to a chamber ringed by rush-woven walls, lanterns glowing amber. Maps made of reed stems and oyster shells adorned the floor. Shifting as the fortress drifted, Meera knelt beside a candle and pointed to a gap in the bent stems. Tomorrow we leave Greywater with the ebb tide. Small boats can slip unseen past Moat Caelin's ruins, but Bolton scouts comb the greenwood north of the causeway. To pass, we must wear new skins. She produced a bundle. A rough-spun gown dyed nut brown, apron gleaming with fish scale sequins sewn in swirling patterns. Crannog fishwife garb day. No one looks twice at a fishwife with her brute husband hauling eel cages. She glanced at Sandor, who stood near the doorway, ears cocked. He won't pass for small folk, but call him half-wit cousin blocked of tongue, and guards will laugh, then wave you through. Sandor grimaced. I'd sooner play mute than babble fawning dog. You need only grunt, Mira said. Sansa frowned. And after Moat Cailin? Northmen loyal to your house hold hidden fastnesses in the Wolfswood, Mira replied. We'll guide you to the Barrowlands. From there, ravens still fly to Robb's war camp. One may find him. Her expression sobered. Your presence could rally bannermen who doubt the young wolf's cause. Or it could paint a target shaped like hope. I cannot hide while my people bleed, Sansa said, quiet but firm. I will take that risk. Mira's smile curved like a crescent blade. Then we carve your path. Morning dawned with wind slicing ripples across the lake. Small skiffs departed in staggered silence, poling toward cane thickets until they vanished. Sansa wore the fishwife dress, braided hair coiled under wool-capped dotty. Sandor donned oversized tunic patched with eel skin, a coarse rope for belt, beard smeared with ash to dull its hue. Mira threaded the mule's reins with clusters of crab pots to sell the disguise. They navigated narrow guts where herons stalked. By dusk they reached the tree line south of Moat Cailin. A ragged crown of ancient black walls half sunken, towers like broken molars jutting from fen. Between rubble piles lay a lone timber gate festooned with flayed man banners, crimson silhouettes dripping paint that might be pitched or dried blood. Campfires spotted the parapets. Shapes moved. Bolton guards lounging. Mira crouched beneath cypress roots with Jojen, Sansa, and Sandor. At nightfall we walk the causeway, she whispered. 2 torches marked the Bolton post. When I speak, keep eyes down and tongues still. Dark bled across the sky. Fog pooled over the causeway, swallowing stray rocks. At the chosen hour, Mira led them onto hard-packed earth, studded with broken flagstones. The mule plodded, crab pots clinking. Halt! A voice barked ahead, reedy, bored. Torchlight leaked through mist, revealing 2 Bolton spearmen under crude shelter. Mira lifted a basket. Eels for the garrison, my lords, she called, accent thick with southern drawl. Best catch before winter freeze. The knight commander always pays 2 coppers per string. One guard stepped forward, nose dripping in cold, eyeing Sandor. Big lad. What's wrong with his face? Dropped poto boiling pitchas babe, Mira said smoothly. Brains boiled with it, don't speak right. Sandor hunched, letting jaw slack. Eyes dull. He emitted a guttural grunt. The guard laughed, spittle shining on lip. Poor sod looks half human. He poked Sandor's chest with spear butt. Sandor swayed, letting the jab glance off layered leather. Sansa kept her gaze on her boots, heart beating thunder beneath ribs. The second guard yawned. Let him through. Commander's fond of eel pies. We'll take our cut. Mira produced a purse. Coins clinked. The guards waved them on. Fog swallowed the torches and Moat Cailin behind them. Sansa exhaled shakily. Sandor straightened, rolling shoulders. Brains boiled, eh? He muttered. A tale to save them from bleeding, Mira replied, not unkindly. They pressed into the pines. The air changed, crisper, scented with spruce and earth unsoured by swamp. Sansa felt it in her marrow. Northern air. Tears pricked unbidden. She brushed them away. Snow began falling again, tiny sparks on forearm. Several miles north, the Crannog guides left them at a crossroads marked by a weather-chewed standing stone, carved with a direwolf chasing stars. They shared silent embraces, then vanished back into woods like mist. Sansa, Sandor, and Mira continued along a half-overgrown track, roughly paralleling the King's Road, but hidden behind ridges. They walked 3 days, encountering only deer and 1 lanky brown bear that turned tail at Sandor's roar. On the 4th morning they crested a low hill. Ahead sprawled the Barrowlands. Gentle rises dotted with barrow mounds older than memory, each crowned by rings of standing stones. A faint plume of smoke rose from the far side of one mound. Cookfire. Mira signaled halt, crept forward. Minutes later she returned. Northern outriders, flint spears. They guard a supply line to Rob's host. They fly the direwolf still. Mend. Hope burst warm in Sansa's chest. She tugged cloak hood aside and walked down the slope. The flint scouts, two wiry men in faded mail, watched warily until she spoke her name. At its utterance, they dropped to one knee. "My lady," said the older, voice thick with emotion. "We thought you lost." He rose, eyes glistening. "Winterfell bleeds for you. Come. Our captain rides north tonight with fresh horses. You can be in the Wolfswood camp within a sennight." "Then?" Sansa nodded, feeling weight lift from shoulders yet heavier burden settle. The burden of being symbol and flesh both. She looked back at Sandor. He remained on the crest, broad silhouette outlined against pale sky. Snow blew around him like ash. "Ser Sandor," she called softly. He tramped downhill, stopping a blade's length away. For an eternity they studied each other, the road behind inscribed on each line of their faces. "You kept me alive," she said. "No." He shook his head once. "Lo, you kept yourself alive. I was shield, nothing more." "Man?" She reached into cloak pocket, produced the dirk I'd given. She pressed it into his palm. "A shield needs a sword. Keep this, so your hand is never empty." His fingers curled around the leather grip. "Where you go, lions and flayed men will follow. The pup with crown of swords may send half the realm after you. I have wolves," she whispered. "And I have learned to bear my own teeth." He grunted, a sound that could have been pride. "If you find you need a hound again, follow the smoke of the worst tavern, the bark of the loudest drunk, and ask for Sandor. I'll come. Now." She smiled, tears trembling on lashes, and stepped forward. Her arms closed around his mailed torso, awkward but unflinching. For an instant he stood rigid. Then one broad hand settled atop her shoulder, unsure as a foal's first step. Mira watched, eyes soft. The flint scouts, averted gaze. Sansa released him, breathing deep. "Stay safe," he snorted. Safety's song suits sparrows, not dogs. Yet his eyes held something almost gentle. He turned, shouldered his pack, and strode south, back the way they had come, vanishing into whirling snow. Mira laid a hand on Sansa's arm. "Paths part so. Others may join." Sansa nodded. She followed the scouts to their camp, a ring of tents nestled between barrows. There, she wrote a letter on rough parchment, by firelight. "Rob, my brother and king, I live. I come north with heart unbroken, and hope sharper than any blade. Trust the reeds, trust the wolves, trust the fire when the snow falls. Your sister, Sansa. She sealed it with pine resin and pressed her thumb into the wax where a direwolf's head should have been. The flint captain vowed to place it in Rob's hand within a fortnight. Night settled. Sansa stood outside her tent, watching the aurora shimmer emerald over the Barrowlands, curtains of light undulating like spirits dancing above graves of forgotten kings. Wind lifted her braid, carried scents of pine and smoke. She closed her eyes and listened. Wolves howling, men laughing, fires crackling. The ancient, patient heartbeat of the north. Tomorrow, she would ride, not as pawn but as player. Stark of Winterfell, storm-birthed in riot, tempered in bog, sharpened on snow-honed truth. Beyond the forests waited battles and councils, betrayals and vows. But tonight, her blood sang only of coming home. Across empty miles, Sandor Clegane trudged beneath same green lights, a lone hound on frozen trail. He felt the dirk's weight against his thigh and, unbidden, a ghost of a smile tugged at cracked lips. Somewhere a little bird flew north on wings of will, and he, a scarred sentinel, walked south to find whatever wars remained for men who lived between fire and void. Above them all, the first true snow of winter swept down like silent hymns, blanketing war, grief, and hope alike, cleaning the slate for wolves and men to write the next chapter in red upon white. Kai-day, Nini-mo. Snow settled in delicate spirals across the Barrowlands camp, long after the watchfires had guttered, each flake glimmering like a pale ember before vanishing into woolen dark. Sansa Stark woke before dawn, heart beating in rhythm with distant wolf howls, and found the parchment square of her letter already gone. The Flint's Raven Master had slipped it away near midnight. A single black feather remained as proof, tucked beside her boots. She brushed its quill across her knuckles, thinking of wings cleaving night toward her brother's war tent. Outside the tent, Captain Herrick Flint conferred with Mira Reed, beside a fire, reduced to faint orange veins in ash. Herrick was rangy as a longbow stave, salt threads in his beard, his leathers heavy with barrow dust. He straightened when Sansa approached, and his raw-boned face softened into something almost paternal. "We ride light," he said. 2 pack mounts, 4 spearmen, and the mule. Paths through the wolfswood vanish under snowdrifts. Better boots than wagons. "Ben?" Mira twirled a slender spear, its obsidian blade shimmering blue in half-light. "Boltons run patrols along the Green Fork, but the deep pines swallow sound. If we keep to streambeds, their hounds will nose only snow." Sansa tightened her cloak, feeling the hair at her nape prickle with both fear and resolve. The dirk from Sandor lay hidden at her hip, wrapped against the cold. She practiced drawing it each dawn as he had instructed, thumb to pommel, pivot wrist, let blade slip free like thought. Every time she did, she remembered the molten shadow of his scarred cheek. They broke camp at sunrise, hoofbeats muffled by crusted powder. The scouts led north by a path known as the Candle Road, named for the way moonlight caught frost on its pines. Barrow mounds gave way to rolling moor, then to forest thick as midnight. The change in air was instant. Crisp spice of cedar, tang of river ice, hush broken only by snow creaking under hooves. Mid-morning brought pale sun shafts through tree crowns. Sansa rode behind Mira atop a pony called Sage, whose tufted ears flicked at every squirrel's scurry. Captain Herrick and his spearmen flanked them in staggered diamond, eyes sweeping between trunks. 2 leagues in, they found the carcass of a deer suspended from a birch by its hind legs, skin peeled and pinned like parchment. A bloody man flayed, but with antlers, mocked them in gruesome craft. Bolton work. Herrick dismounted, muttered a prayer to the old gods, then cut the rope, letting the deer slump respectfully into a snowbank. "Message," Mira said, wiping gore off her knife. "They know this path is used. We quicken pace." Herrick answered. The woods tightened, branches clawing at cloaks, until the company descended a gully where an icebound creek meandered. Sansa heard the water beneath crust sigh like a sleeper. They followed its bed, each step, crunching crystalline panes. Near noon, Mira thrust a hand up. Everyone froze. Somewhere ahead metal clinked, a careless boot-meeting stirrup. Herrick signaled 2 spears forward. They slid between alders, melting into white gloom. Moments stretched brittle as icicles. Then came a shout, cut short by steel on steel. Herrick drew his sword and surged, Sansa clutching Sage's mane as the pony danced. She glimpsed a Bolton rider toppling from his saddle, arrow sprouting from throat. Mira's work? But 2 more horsemen burst from pines. Mail hauberks, flayed man sigils dark with fresh splatter. Herrick met them with a tiger's grace, parrying a spear thrust, slashing through girth straps, so saddle slid and rider spilled under hooves. The second lancer spurred at Mira. She sidestepped, caught the spear shaft and pivoted, dragging the rider half off balance. He lashed a short sword, scoring her arm. She hissed, drove obsidian point beneath his jaw. Black glass entered like whisper, came out red. Sansa heard herself gasp. A third attacker she had not seen, a bearded archer on foot, knocked an arrow toward Mira's exposed back. Without thought, she swung her pony, drew Sandor's dirk, and kicked Sage into a jarring trot. She shouted, wordless. The archer pivoted surprised. The arrow sailed high. Sansa closed the gap, slashing downward in clumsy arc. Steel scraped leather sleeve. Not deep, a graze, but enough to make him drop the bow. Herrick's spear followed, punching through mail into belly. The man folded like wet parchment. Silence returned as sudden as crows abandoning a field. Steam rose from human blood, curling into coal. Mira bound her sleeve with a strip torn from Bolton cloak. "Your first cut," she said to Sansa, lips tight but eyes proud. "It was luck," Sansa whispered, hand trembling around dirk hilt. "Luck favors hearts ready." She clasped Sansa's wrist, steadying. Sandor would say the same. They dragged bodies behind alders. Swept snow to mask struggle, and remounted. Herrick recovered one of the Bolton horses, its saddlebags stuffed with strips of salted pork, and 2 flasks of strong fire. Supplies for them now. They pressed on until dusk bled orange veins behind peaks. Camp was a hollow beneath leaning spruce, branches interlaced overhead to blur smoke. The spearmen set perimeter with silent efficiency. Sansa sat near flickering coals, turning today's violence over in mind like stones churning under surf. She did not feel shame, only a quiet gravity, as if part of her childhood had been folded away forever. Mira joined her, holding twin cups of hot pine needle tea. "When I first hunted boar with my father, I fainted at the squeal. It took 3 hunts to still shake. I think I will dream of his eyes," Sansa murmured. How fear became surprise. Then nothing. "Dreams will come. Let them teach but not chain. We walk because ghosts cannot." Mira sipped, winced as sleeve brushed wound. Sansa reached to examine the cut. Clean slice along bicep, already stitched. "You should rest," she said. "I'll rest when Starks sit Winterfell's hall again," Mira answered, but her smile eased. Wind rose, rattling spruce needles like rain. Sansa watched sparks drift into black canopy and wondered if Robb looked at the same sky, if Sandor did. South winds carried rumors of pursuits. Lannister gold promised for the Hound's head, double if the little bird returned caged. She pictured Sandor trudging alone through snow, bounty hunters sniffing. She whispered a silent prayer. Old gods knew. Any that heard. Morning unfurled blue and brittle. Mira announced they would leave the creek bed, cutting cross-country to avoid Bolton patrol lines. Herrick frowned. Deep drifts slowed horse, but flayed men slowed life permanently. Decision fixed, they climbed a ridge where wind scoured earth clear. From its crown the Wolfswood stretched north, a sea of green-black waves frozen mid-surge. Somewhere within waited Deepwood Motte, then the White Knife Valley, then the heart of Robb's war. The ridge descent proved treacherous. Ice-sheathed stones, hidden fissures. One flint spearman, Rise, lost footing, tumbling 30 feet before Herrick anchored rope and hauled him battered but alive. Rhys walked after, limp obvious. They did not speak of turning back. Forward was the only compass. By second sundown they entered the Wolfswood. Pines here were giants older than Barrow Kings. Trunks 7 men embrace could not span. Snow lay powdery, muffling every hoof crunch. They adopted a hunter's pace. Silent single file, eyes always branching. Sansa felt as though they walked inside a cathedral carved by wolves, pillared aisles of trunks, vaulted arch of branches. Late that night, campfire no bigger than a prayer. Herrick showed Sansa how to string a light hunting bow they'd taken off a Bolton scout. His fingers guided hers, patient. A lady of Winterfell once laid a heart at her father's feet on her name day, he said. Not with steel alone do we win the North. She drew, released into darkness. Arrow thumped into moss. Not tonight, she said. Tomorrow, he replied. Dawn came muted behind thick cloud. Snow began again mid-morning. Fat flakes, restful hush. As they trudged, Mira's spear tip stopped mid-swing. She knelt, brushed powder off a fallen branch. Paw prints, 4-toed, wide as her palm. Direwolf, da-da. Sansa's breath hitched. Ghost. She thought of Joan's silent companion. Could be Shaggy Dog, Mira mused. Or Grey Wind? She assessed depth. 4 days old. She rose. Where wolves prowl, men think twice. They made good distance until midday when storm thickened. flurries swirling into near whiteout. Herrick led them beneath an overhang of limestone. Snow packed across entrance gave appearance of solid wall until cleared. Inside waited a shallow cave, bones of ancient elk littering floor. Flint history named it Wolf's Mouth. Wind howled outside, rattling pine branches like shield rims. The company settled to wait. Herrick produced carved bone dice, 2 spears gamed quietly in corner. Mira meditated cross-legged. Sansa took cloak aside to mend a seam torn by alder snag, listening to storm sing. Hours later, as torch guttered, a faint vibration prickled the cave floor. Hooves thudding soft on snow outside. Herrick doused torch in dirt. Silence stretched, broken by sniffing grunt. Through cave slit, Sansa glimpsed shape. Horse? No, larger. A roan elk with rack broad as cartwheels stood sniffing wind. Relief trickled. But then came voices. Muffled curses, clanking gear. Riders. Died. Bolton colors? Herrick signaled. They readied. Footfall crunched near entrance. A gloved hand brushed snow aside. Torchlight spilled, revealing a face half covered by scarf. Helm ridge unsubtle. Flayed man's sigil etched. The torchbearer's eyes narrowed at darkness within. Mira hurled a fist-sized stone. Torch dropped, hissed in snow. Herrick lunged. Sword flash, yanked man inside, blade across throat. Garnet spray sizzled on limestone. Shouts outside. Spearmen braced shields. A volley of quarrels clattered against rock. Herrick kicked corpse aside, hefted bow, fired blind through slit. Scream answered. Sansa crouched behind packs. Adrenaline hammered louder than wind. She saw Rhys, limp-legged, handing arrows to Herrick, face grim. Boltons regrouped, torches bobbing like hellfire in blizzard gloom. One approached with shield overhead, covering arbalest. Herrick leaned to loose. String snapped. He cursed, rolled aside as bolt punched stone. Shards stinging. Mira vaulted through slit. Spear first. 2 heartbeats later, a Bolton staggered back Sans eye. She disappeared into storm, silhouette flickering between flakes. Spearmen followed, war cries swallowed by wind. Sansa stayed, until Rhys pressed a spare spearshaft bow into her hands, string taut. "Hold cave," he wheezed. Then limped out. She knelt, knocked arrow, breath slow. Shadows danced outside, figures grappling. She sought target. Bolton's sword raised above Herrick's back. She exhaled, released. Arrow sailed, vanished into storm. Metal clanged, scream rose. She didn't know if it was hers, but figure collapsed. Herrick whirled, saw her. He saluted with sword tip, resumed duel. Minutes stretched molten. Finally, shapes dwindled. Storm regained dominion. One by one Northmen returned, snow-caked, blood-smeared. Mira last, dragging a wounded Bolton by collar. Prisoner for tongues. They had lost Rhys. His limp slowed him into sword arc. Herrick mourned with silent kneel, gathering arrow shafts from snow. They bound prisoner, a youth barely older than Sansa. Cheeks still downy. Fear leaked from him despite bravado. Herrick asked troop numbers near White Knife. Boy spat. Mira pressed obsidian tip to kneecap. Answer flowed. 50 men at Hillfort called Pinehenge, banner of a flayed bear, supply line south. Bolton orders. Sweep Wolfswood for Stark sympathizers fleeing. Bounty on Stark girl alive. Sansa swallowed. Herrick slit throat after Mira nodded. Too dangerous to release. He dragged body beyond drift, buried under falling snow. That night grief lay heavy. Sansa stared at flames until tears carved salt tracks. Mira sat beside, wrapping new bandages round bicep. Loss measures worth, she murmured. Rhys's spirit strengthens our purpose if we carry his name north. Sansa nodded, voice cracked. I will remember. Storm died by dawn. Unveiling forest draped in unbroken white. Silence felt sacramental. They departed cave with Rhys spear lashed upright on mule. A cairn in motion. By twilight third day they reached fringe of Deepwood Motted's outskirts. Palisaded town perched on rocky hill. Banners of House Glover. Silver fist on scarlet. Flapping. Smoke rose from forges. War drums faint. Glover's sentries halted them, bows drawn, until Herrick announced company. Recognition of Stark name opened gates. The wooden yard bustled with smiths shaping arrowheads, row upon row of spears leaning. Lady Sybil Glover emerged, practical wool gown, hair braided tight. Her gaze studied Sansa with equal parts relief and steel. Winterfell's daughter at last, she said. Your brother will break chains to hold you safe. Inside the hall they warmed over boar roast, while Sybil relayed tidings. Robb encamped east of Seaguard, feinting toward the twins. Karstark loyalty fraying after prisoner dispute. Rumors of Frey alliances shifting. Sansa listened, heart aching with weight of politics. I must reach him, she said. Every hour counts. Sybil tapped map. Dead-eye. Fastest road is the drowned path along coast, then sail via Maidenstown. But Ironborn prowls. Safer to ride inland across the White Knife's frozen shallows. Skirt the next top, and meet his outriders near the twins. Then I wonder. Herrick agreed. Meera would guide across rivers. Glover would supply fresh mounts, winter rations, and 5 additional riders. They rested 2 nights. Sansa bathed, her first hot water since King's Landing. Bruises blossomed purple on thighs. She stared at reflection in copper basin, saw cheeks hollowed, eyes keener. She plaited hair like warrior's braid, tied with strip cut from Bolton cloak, a reminder to wear fear as armor. Before dawn departure, Sybil gifted a dirk of castle-forged steel with silver wolf pommel. North remembers, she said. Sansa felt weight of 2 blades now, Sanders and Sybil's, balanced across hips like twin promises. Company of 11 rode out. Weather held clear, air sharp enough to slice lungs. They reached White Knife by midday, river a ribbon of glass beneath snow. Meera tested edge with thrown stone. It bounced. They crossed single file, hooves echoing hollow until safe. Beyond lay fields where Ironborn raiders had torched hamlets. Charred beams jutted like ribs. Frozen corpses dotted furrows, picked clean by wolves. Ironborn and farmer alike. Each death an ink stroke in ledger of war. They camped under ruined windmill, broken sails creaking. Herrick set double watches. Sansa shared a tent with Meera. Night conversation turned to dreams. Do you still dream green? Sansa asked. Less since my father's death, Meera replied, voice shadow soft. But sometimes I see a heart wrapped in vines, still beating. Dagger of black glass poised above it, not sure whose heart. Sansa shivered. Prophecy's burden weighs heavy. Choice still shapes blade, Meera answered. We can turn it aside. Morning brought gray dawn and bitter wind. They rode until midday when horizon darkened. Storm front rolling. Ice pellets stung faces. Herrick ordered halt at abandoned septee, shrouded by firs. They wedged doors, led horses inside nave where cracked angels watched from niches. Snow roared outside. Inside, torchlight revealed frescoes of the 7 chipped by vandals. Sansa traced Mother's face erased. She wondered which god listened to Stark's. That night howling rose, not wind, but wolves. Deep voices, pack large. Horses stamped. Meera smiled faintly. They guard. Before dawn scouts shouted alarm. Riders on approach from south. Herrick climbed belfry slit, spied torches weaving. Bolton search party, he said. Dozen at least. They readied barricade across nave door. Sansa stood behind overturned pew, bow strung. Meera propped javelins along columns. Boltons arrived hammering oak. Herrick called. This is holy ground. Pass on. A gruff voice laughed. Gods abandoned you with the wolves, traitors. Surrender the Stark whelp, and we spare your tongues. Bolts thudded door. Bolton axes hacked. Splinters flew. Herrick waited until plank cracked, then signaled. Arrows streaked through gap, felling first intruder. Boltons roared, surged. Mira's spear lanced one, pinning to doorframe. Northmen met clash with grim fury. Sansa fired into shapes, arrow after arrow, until quiver empty. She drew Sabel's dirk, heart steady, stepped between pews. Bolton soldier, vaulted railing, mace raised. She ducked, thrust upward. Blade slid under ribs. Soldier gasped iron stink, toppled against her. She shoved him aside, nausea burning yet control firm. Battle raged, but Northmen outnumbered still. Suddenly, an unearthly baying erupted outside, dirge deep, echoing. Wolves poured through shattered stained glass. Enormous shadows, eyes flaming amber. Gray wind. No. Smaller, but fierce. They fell on Boltons, tearing hamstrings, dragging screaming men into snow. Boltons broke, fleeing into blizzard. Wolves vanished as quick. Silence crashed. Snows drifted through broken windows onto pews painted with blood. Herrick wiped sword, lips moving thanks. Mira knelt by dead wolf puppet doorway, arrow lodged in chest. She stroked fur, eyes glistening. Sansa joined. North pays every debt, Mira whispered. They buried pup in sept courtyard, under weirwood saplings surviving stone. Sansa pressed a kiss to cold fur before earth covered. After storm waned, they set out again, urgency sharpened by cost. 2 days of forced march carried them beyond white plains to muddy banks, where Twins towers loomed across Green Fork. Massive stone, 50 archers visible along battlements. River ice here cracked. Ferry chains bit through slush. But far ridge to west flew banners of the direwolf and swordbear, Robb's outriders. Herrick waved signal cloth. Northmen galloped. The foremost rider reined, helm off, tall-heart officer. When he spotted Sansa, his eyes widened. By the old gods, he breathed. The king will weep joy. They escorted company into encampment of pavilions stretching meadow like patchwork hides. Fires flickered, men in mail bustled. Sansa's heart pounded thunder as they approached a red tent ringed by guards with direwolf cloaks. Guard captain parted flaps. Inside, the young wolf hunched over maps. Auburn hair tangled. Crown absent. He looked up. Frown etched. When eyes fixed on Sansa, breath caught. Map slid from fingers. Sansa. She crossed space, cloak falling. Brother. He enveloped her, armor plates cold through her tunic, but warmth blossomed. Robb's shoulders shook. She felt his tears in her hair. I feared, every raven said. He murmured broken. I live? She said, voice steady. I found my way. Many helped. Rhys died. Sandor saved me at start. Robb stepped back, wiping eyes. We owe them. Herrick and Mira bowed. Robb clasped hands. Gratitude raw.oi. War Council summoned. Lords crowded. Mage Mormont, Greatjon Umber, Galbart Glover, Edmure Tully weathered. Faces lit with awe at Sansa's return. She recounted flight, riot, Hound, marsh routes, Bolton patrols, depths of flayer cruelty. Silence thickened with each detail. When she finished, Greatjon slammed fist on trestle. Flayed scum breach guest right hunting Ned's daughter. I'll carve their pink hides for banners. Robb eyes ice. Roose will answer. He turned to scribes. Send ravens to every northern holdfast. The king's sister is safe, hope stands. To Sansa. Your presence will rally hearts wavering. Sansa nodded. But Lannisters know I escaped. Cersei will spin lies. I have a plan. Robb gestured at map near Twins. We parley with Walder Frey soon. Your witness may sway old Weasel. He paused, concerned. Yet risk great. I did not come to sit idle, Sansa said. She laid Sandor's dirk on table. I carry blade and voice. Council resumed deep into night. Strategies revised. Feint toward Harrenhal to draw Tywin east. Strike supply lines at Maidenpool. Robb listened to Sansa's account of small folk hunger. He ordered grain wagons redirected to villages along march. Compassion as tactic. Days passed in camp. Sansa moved between healers' tents, helping bandage, singing to wounded. Soldiers whispered of Lady Stark returned. Symbol of home. Morale swelled. One dusk a scout galloped in. Lannister outrider captured 6 leagues south. A man with half-burned face. Sansa's stomach flipped. She hurried to guard tent. Torches illuminated Sandor Clegane bound to post, blood-crusted lip. One eye swollen, yet he smirked on seeing her. "Bird flies north, quick," he croaked. She hugged him, disregarding chains. Guard startled. Robb arrived. Recognition flared. Distrust followed. "He saved me," Sansa declared. "His life is mine to speak for." Robb studied Sandor, then sheathed sword. "You fought beneath Joffrey's banners. Why turn cloak?" Sandor spat blood. "Tired of wearing collars forged by bastards." He looked at Sansa. "I follow my own leash now." Robb weighed. "We need men who hate Lannisters more than fear them. Fight for me, dog, and earn pardon." Sandor shrugged as far as bindings allowed. "Give me an axe. Point me at lions." Robb cut bonds. "Welcome, but..." Later by fire, Sandor recounted ambush by Lannister hunters, who captured him. He broke free, killed 3, but rode into Stark patrol. He wore Bolton cloak to mislead, nearly got him shot. Sansa laughed, relieved tears cutting soot on his cheek. She dabbed salve. Nights grew colder as campaign readied to march. Robb insisted Sansa ride near command column under guard. Sandor rode alongside, greatsword across back, eyes scanning. Mira and 2 Crannog scouts remained, guiding through hidden fords. Approached to twins, shadowed by tension. Walder Frey's bridge lights flickered like watchful eyes. Sansa remembered whispers of Frey's slights, fear of betrayal. She urged Robb to treat politely, offering her presence as assurance. He agreed. Parley day. Robb, Sansa, Catelyn's uncle Edmure, and small retinue rode to Gatehouse. Inside, Walder Frey awaited. Gaunt hawk nose, lips thin. His brood of sons lined walls, eyes appraising. Frey gaze settled on Sansa, recognition sparking greed. "Stark girl fled lions," he rasped. "Rare bird." Sansa curtsied with grace sharpened by trial. "Lord Walder, the North remembers your past aid. My brother seeks passage to save his people." Frey sniffed. "Tolls rise. Yet, a Stark maiden in hall brings honor." He leaned. "Remain here as guest, and bridge opens free." Robb stiffened. Sansa lifted chin. "I am not a token." She let steel edge slip into tone. But Frey name could be sung in ballads of northern victory if alliance forged. Trade rights, river patrols, marriages with loyal houses. Frey narrowed eyes, calculating. Negotiations spooled hours. Sansa parried each lecherous suggestion with measured courtesy, turned demands into barters. In the end, Frey agreed. Bridge passage, troops and grain in exchange for future seat on King's Council and ward fostered at Winterfell. Robb clasped Sansa's shoulder after. "You outplayed a master schemer." "Years at court taught me something," she said. Army crossed twins next sunrise. Drums thundering across river. Frey soldiers cheered. Hopes rose. March southeast led through war-torn riverlands. Ash pillars dotted horizon. Ravens a constant. Yet with each village liberated, cheers greeted Sansa's presence. Child survivors clinging to her skirts, calling her lady. She carried Winterfell wherever she walked. Soldiers marched straighter. At Maidenpool, their vanguard crushed a Lannister garrison, capturing supply convoy. Inside wagons, starving small folk from Crown lands were caged, to be sold. Sansa ordered cages broken, food distributed. Her fury blazed. Sandor watched with respect. Word reached camp. Stannis Baratheon defeated at Blackwater. Tyrion wounded. Joffrey still sits. But King's Landing writhes in debt. Grain scarce. Robb saw opportunity. Storm of rebellion brewing if northern host threatened capital again. In council, Sansa suggested sending ravens to smallfolk guilds in city, promising fair treatment under Stark rule. Propaganda war. Lords hesitated, using commoners. She argued hearts of people weigh armies. Robb consented. Winter deepened. Supply lines stretched. Mira's dreams grew restless. She saw heart bound in vines again. But Dagger's hand belonged to a pale man in wolf cloak. She told Sansa, fear flickering. Sansa pondered. Bolton flayed men wear wolf cloaks stolen. She warned Robb. Scouts soon reported. Roose Bolton marched from Harrenhal north, claiming to relieve Stark host, but letters proved forged. He allied secretly with Freys. Betrayal. Sansa felt chill deeper than snow. She advised swift strike before Bolton reached Twins. Robb weighed risk, fighting sworn bannermen, undermining unity. But Greatjon roared agreement. Decision. Intercept Bolton near Fairmarket. Army pivoted west, speed vital. Snowstorms battered. Men stumbled through drifts. Sandor's booming commands kept line from fracturing. His voice a war horn. Sansa rode at Colin's heart, reciting northern songs to weary ranks, each verse a lantern. Battle of Fairmarket erupted under slate sky. Bolton forces arrayed, flayed man banners alongside black walrus of Frey vanguard. Arrows darkened air. Sansa watched from rise with healers, hands gripping horse mane. Robb led charge, gray wind leaping ahead, teeth bared. Sandor split enemy ranks like thunder, greatsword shearing mail. Mira and Crannogman emerged from riverbanks, skewering cavalry with poisoned darts. But Bolton cunning revealed. Hidden batteries of scorpions flinging barbed bolts. One bolt skewered Robb's mount, toppling him. Chaos. Sansa's heart lurched. She spurred forward. Healers shouted, but she did not stop. She reached fallen brother, dismounted amid carnage. Robb rose, knee bleeding. Boltons converged. Sansa drew Sybel's dirk, planted beside Robb. Sandor saw, veered, cutting swath. He stood before siblings. Shield thrown aside, sword two-handed. Wolves, gray wind, and two wild direwolves from forest joined. Battle tide turned. Flint spears rallied. Greatjon's berserkers smashed flayed lines. Arrow from Herrick struck Bolton's standard bearer. Banner toppled. Panic rippled. Roose Bolton himself appeared astride dapple gray, eyes cold. He locked gaze with Sansa. Recognition, mild interest. Then he fled, cloak streaming. Stark host pursued, but dusk and storm-clothed Bolton escape. Field secured nonetheless. Frey contingents surrendered once Bolton fled. Robb clasped Sansa near pyres after. You saved me. Wolf blood saved you, she said. But tears flowed. Fear delayed. They burned dead under snow-swollen clouds. Rhys's spear stood among pyres, point glowing amber. Winter's first full gale swept camp that night, rattling tents. But hearts burned steady. Betrayal laid bare. Unity steeled. In weeks following, ravens delivered news. River lords rising, appalled by Bolton treachery. Queen Cersei quarantined capital fearing bread riots. Tywin recalled forces to defend. The realm cracked like river ice. Robb convened Grand Council at Seaguard. Lords, smallfolk envoys, even ironborn deserters gathered. Sansa spoke of justice built on mercy. Fields sown not burned, banners earned not bought. Her voice wove through hall like harpstring. Men listened. Decision. March on King's Landing come spring, with Riverland secured first. But winter storms made roads impassable. They would winter in north-friendly keeps, rebuild strength. Sansa petitioned to travel with Herrick and Mira to Winterfell, to rally north and free Holdfast from Bolton garrison left behind. Robb hesitated but agreed. Symbol returning to ancestral seat could ignite hearts. Sandor volunteered as shield. Robb eyed him. You'd go back to snow you hate. Hay keeps you warm. Sandor grunted. And so another journey formed. Sansa, Sandor, Mira, Herrick, and handpicked scouts, to slip past lines and raise Winterfell's people. On eve of departure, Sansa visited Ravens. She penned new letter, this time to her sister Arya. Whereabouts unknown, words winged wherever fate. I walk north with fire inside, and pack at my side. Wherever snow falls upon your path, know it falls on mine too. Follow the howl home. She sealed with wolf pommel waxed all. Before dawn, company rode out under aurora crackling green like dragon's breath across sky. Snowflakes glittered, and each hoofbeat felt drum of destiny. Ahead, awaited ruined walls. Childhood memories buried in ash, a castle needing voice. Sansa straightened in saddle, cloak billowing. Sandor rode beside, face fierce but eyes glinting respect. Mira smiled, spear gleaming frost. Herrick hummed tune of old kings. They vanished into drifting snow, 5 silhouettes threading silent cathedral of pines, toward Winterfell, and the battles yet to write across red on white. Story stretching bold and unbroken, a tapestry still weaving beneath winter stars.